Hello, and welcome to Bob's RPG Radio, your number one station for RPG inspiration. I'm your host, Bob Worldbuilder, and today we'll be sitting down with Alphinius Goo, founder of the Gooey Cube TTRPG company, and none other than Luke Gygax, not only the son of Gary Gygax, but also the founder of GaryCon and the Gaxx Worx game company. Together, we answered questions from the community and discussed the past, present, and future of role-playing games, and we had a good time doing it. So thanks again to Luke, Alphinius, and the Gooey Cube team for setting this up, and a huge thanks to our channel members and patrons who make all of this possible and get these recordings earlier than anyone else. Now, if you haven't already, I invite you to sit back and tune in here on Bob's RPG Radio. Take two. Right. Hey, I'm Bob. This is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together. And I am here with two experienced players, game masters, and game designers, Alphinius Goo and Luke Gygax, whose name might ring a bell. So starting with Luke, could you introduce yourself?
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me on here. I'm Luke Gygax. I'm one of the sons of Gary Gygax, the co-creator of Dungeons & Dragons. I literally grew up at the gaming table, and role-playing is in my DNA. I was lucky enough to game with my dad and a lot of his friends who were also designers, artists, and creators from my earliest memories. And after my father passed away in 2008, I kind of made it my life's work to run GaryCon Memorial Convention to him. And now that I've retired from the military, I also do game design through my company, Gaxx Worx, which is sort of how I met Alphinius.
All right.
Indeed.
Yeah, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Do you want me to go,
Alphinius?
Bob, the world builder? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, it's all you.
Well, first of all, it is marvelous to be here. And yes, I'm a little goofy, so be prepared for that. I did say that at the beginning. So you have been warned on poor Bob's channel that this can be annoying. I'll do my best not to be too annoying, but I might be a little annoying. Anyway, yes, I am Alphinius Goo, and I have this little game company with a number of other folks called Gooey Cube. And for some reason, we decided to go into the game business. I don't know why we did that, but we did it. And through the process of going into the game business, we met this marvelous person named Luke, and of course met marvelous you too, Bob. And it is marvelous to be here. And Luke, I don't know, goodness gracious, it's been a couple of years now, right, my friend? Something like that?
Yeah, I think it's maybe 3 or more. Yeah.
Yeah, and we started talking. We go to GaryCon on a regular basis. We love that convention. By the way, coming up in March. Get your
Very
badges.
soon.
Are they sold out, Luke?
They're sold out. We sold out. It's the 50th
Ooh.
anniversary year of Dungeons & Dragons. Lake Geneva's the birthplace. Obviously, Gary Gygax and D&D go together. So we sold out. We even looked at things and added like 300 or 400 more badges, and we sold those out. So it's as many as we can comfortably fit there. So unfortunately, there's no more badges. However, because I knew that this was a big year, I do have an event before GaryCon, a much smaller one that harkens back to the earliest days of GaryCon and celebrates more of the old school, although all games are always welcome, called Founders and Legends. So if you want to come in the weekend before, there's hotel rooms available, there's badges available. It'll be under 500 people there, but like 30 great guests, anywhere from Mike Merles and Todd Stashwick to Tim Kask and Jim Ward. So a little slice, everybody. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
No, I'm
I would say,
gonna
so speaking
see if
of
I can make that
the-
work. So I apologize, Bob. Go ahead.
I was going to say, speaking of the early days, the topic of our conversation today is the past, present, and future of RPGs. That topic came from the community here on YouTube, and really from one great question. So while we have gathered a bunch of questions from the community, we're going to begin with the past part and begin with that main question, and then sort of revisit it as we go along into the present and then future. So first part here, to both of you, and we can start with Alphinius. But what is your take on how you used to see people interacting with TTRPGs in the earlier days of the hobby?
Well, first of all, I am old, so everyone needs to understand that from the beginning, yes? So I was playing this game probably almost as early as Luke was playing this game. because I was playing it in the 70s. Luke? When was your first endeavor? When did you actually sit at the table for the first time with your dad? Do you even remember?
I do. It was a pretty seminal moment. I was very, very young. I was 4 years old. It was 1974. And I played in a very early game, a very early version of a scenario that was come out later. I played a ranger in in the village of Hamlet, and I was hired as a man. I was hired as a man at arms to go along with the party, because that was a thing in old school. You would bring hirelings into the dungeon with you, right? Because it was dangerous.
Somebody's got to carry the torch.
Exactly. Yeah, somebody has to have the 10-foot poles and all that stuff. And so, yeah, but I was really a spy for the druid, the local druid, who wanted to make sure that the party wasn't actually servants of evil trying to reestablish a presence at the moat house. And,
named Jaru, yes? Named Jaru?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, in those early days, like, how were people interacting with the game? Was it like very serious? Were people more casual about it? Was there a spectrum of that? Was it a lot of like younger people, older people? Like, who was playing this game, and how were they playing it?
So I'll answer that one because I was a consumer, right? Versus Luke, I just lived at the co-creator's table, right? So here I am a kid, right? Here I am a kid. And my friend calls me and says, "Hey, would you like to play this adventure called Dungeons and Dragons, this game?" And I'd heard about it, but I'm not, I got my nerdy friends and I got my non-nerdy friends. And in those days, you had to be really, really careful, right? Because your non-nerdy friends would tease you mercilessly, and you could even get beat up, right? So you didn't tell anybody you were going to play Dungeons and Dragons. So I went out to play with my nerdy friends, and we had some games and we did some fun things. But when I really got hooked was actually a couple of years later, when we played Janelle Jaquet's magnificent Dark Tower. And of course, we lost Janelle just recently, and a terrible sadness for the gaming community. But Dark Tower, we played literally from the middle of the day on Saturday until 4 a.m. on Sunday morning. And I was totally hooked at that point. So that in those days, how we did this, Bob, was we would sit around and we would play with the tiny number of miniatures that were available in the marketplace at that time, from Raupartha, from Grenadier, and we used dominoes for our walls, right? Nice. And we had a plethora of dice available primarily from one company, and we would sit around these tables, pool tables, whatever, and we'd use model railroad trees, and that was what we did, because it was nothing like it is today.
Yeah, definitely didn't have the amount of like resources and things you could, decorate your table with, so to speak. Very cool. So like the homegrown nature of it, I guess, was obviously more prominent back then because there wasn't as much wider support. And so I think we're already touching on this next question, but it was sort of like, what was your first interactions with the game, or what were like the moments that really like kind of turned on, like, this could be a thing I do for the rest of my life? So for you, was it Dark Tower, Alphinius?
It was unequivocally a module beyond its time, way beyond its time. And, and it was just a wonderful journey, and it was magnificent. And for me, there was no game like it from that point forward, all the way still to this day, magnificent.
Yeah. I would, so to say from my own experience, I kind of had the same thing. The first time I played it, it was a friend who invited me to do so, and I had already played like, numerous video game RPGs over the years at this point. But yeah, here I am in my early 20s. This is the first time playing a tabletop role-playing game, and realizing that I can try to do anything, and it just totally changed it for me, like from the very first session. And so, Luke, you started at 4 years old. 4-year-olds aren't usually making like lifelong decisions. So for you, I guess, was it just a more natural thing? Like, it was always just a part of your childhood, and you just kind of kept along for this ride, but eventually took the reins? Or like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I literally, it never even crossed my mind not to game. That's what we did at my house. So my dad loved gaming of all kinds, and from chess or checkers even, or shogi, go, cards, cribbage, all sorts of games. So we played board games. We played, obviously, Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games, which were being invented at that point, right? Because Dungeons and Dragons was the first role-playing game.
Yeah.
And what I've heard many people say to me, and obviously I wouldn't have realized it at the time because I was just a kid myself. They said that through playing D&D, and especially with my dad, it was the first time an adult interacted with them on an equal footing. They were playing a character, and he didn't say, "Hey, kid," or "Junior," or whatever. He gave them a chance to lead, to decide what they were doing. They were in charge. They got to practice a lot of skills, and that felt good to a lot of people. And I think it's empowering, and also teaches you life lessons, right, about how to conduct yourself. And it's a great way to experiment through life too. You're like, "Hey, can I do that?" "Oh, that really made people mad if I said one thing and did another thing," or whatever it is, right? You can learn some consequences of doing that stuff, but it's in a game, so it's
exactly,
much less
it's
impact.
a good testing ground, literally, for all kinds of things.
Well,
right.
Luke, if I might, Bob, just for a second, Luke. Also, the thing that your dad probably never imagined, but is something that is truly amazing, is how wonderful this game is for not just teaching life lessons, but life skills, right? And also for helping kids that are on the spectrum, for helping socialization. I mean, there's so much that we just had no idea about, that today is literally, for some people, truly life changing. And it just blows my mind as I ponder that here are these guys sitting around, and they come up with this thing called role playing that really didn't exist before. And all of a sudden it's changing lives for the positive. It's magnificent.
I'm glad you bring this up, because I was thinking, before I was going to jump to this question, I was thinking about how apparently I read before that I think it was David Wesley wasn't even super keen on using the term role-playing, because I guess it was established as a psychological thing at the time still. But nonetheless, it's like D&D and games like it ended up making role-playing, for all the benefits that it has that you just laid out, just more accessible to everyone, instead of having to do it in an office or something, So
but RPG didn't exist, and it's not on the original box. It says like fantasy medieval
adventure game,
with pen and paper and dice and miniatures. It's a terrible title. D&D, Dungeons and Dragons is great, and then there's this long subtitle that doesn't really make sense.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up too, because one quick question that was in here, and I'm sure this answer is already out there, but how did Gary and Dave settle on the name Dungeons and Dragons? Like, obviously we got the alliteration there, but were there other contenders for the name? Like, is that a story that's already been told, or?
So my dad wrote the game. So he discussed the ideas with Dave Arneson, and Dave showed him his they call it fantasy game. I don't even know if they called it Blackmore at that point. But the Minnesota guys were doing it. And as my understanding is, and some other folks know a little bit better, like Bob Meyer still runs the game. I believe that Dave Arneson did, as one of his members at his table. But as I recall, you played yourself in a fantasy world. So I'd be Luke, Luke the hero, or Luke the sorcerer, or whatever it is. And you go down there, and it was more narrative. There wasn't like stats or anything like that. There wasn't a whole lot of mechanics, but you could, if I did very well at something, say, "Oh, in the future, you have a +1 on your die 6 or 2d6 roll that you get on doing something like that." So the idea of getting better over time was there, and that sort of thing. So he showed my dad this idea, because my dad really enjoyed chainmail, and had put the fantasy supplement together, and had reduced that down from units battling units to rules for man-to-man combat. And as you mentioned, Dave Wesley had been doing something that was a very early kind of version of maybe role-playing, where there was a referee and people with different goals who were trying to negotiate and figure out what's going on, and there'd be discussion and then adjudication with the referee. So my dad wrote rules for this, basically combining chainmail and some other ideas. Boom, came together. He didn't know what to call it, so he wrote down various names. Swords and sorcery was a title in books then, right?
Yeah, just a genre. Okay.
Bradford the Grey Book, right? So he's like, that sounds pretty good. What could I do that's like swords and sorcery? And so he wrote down a few, and he asked us kids, and my sister Cindy, who's 4 years older than me, said, I like that one, Dad. Dungeons and Dragons. So there's like 2 columns. You have this
Cool.
or this or this. Yeah. And so she picked Dungeons and Dragons. And he said, "All right, that's it. We're gonna go with Dungeons."
Do you remember any of the other ones?
No. Yeah, I would have been. So she was probably 7, and I was probably like 3.
Oh man. So. Okay. Man, the lost
spells and
possible futures.
Right?
Could have been. Yeah. Exactly.
All right, and then speaking of these memories again, so do either of you have any particular memories from your earlier days with the game, or some general but fun aspect of the game that was really like a product of either playstyle at the time or the rules at the time, and therefore would be something that a player today like couldn't quite experience the same way?
So if I might, there's a great tale that you have to take yourself back to a bunch of kids who are playing this game. Young people. I wasn't really a kid. I was, late teens, early 20s, and we're playing this game, right? And we've been progressing, and modules have started coming out, and we're starting to read things. And all of a sudden, and you have to imagine where we were, because for the most part, you would have a map. You would go down a hallway, you'd knock down the door, and you'd kill the monster. That was pretty much what would happen. And every once in a while, you would get what was called a random encounter, who might encounter you in the hallway, right? So this is kind of what happened. And then you kind of wrapped a little bit of a story around it. And then this amazing thing happened. It was a module called Ravenloft. And we suddenly were exposed to the idea, the radical concept that monsters could actually move around the dungeon and get you in all kinds of places, right? And all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, we don't have to walk down the hallway and knock down the door. We can actually move these monsters. They can appear in different places. And I mean, I know it sounds really silly to everybody.
But it was an innovation. Right,
it was crazy. So my hat's off to, I believe, Tracy Hickman and Laura Hickman, I think, wrote Ravenloft. And my hat's off. It was it was unbelievable. It was like, oh my God, Strahd moves about.
All right.
That for me was epiphanal.
Luke, do you have anything like that where it's something that you experienced in the past that a player today wouldn't really have the same experience with if they had the same thing?
Yeah, so I would say the nature of the game changed a bit. So as Alphinius stated, it was an underground exploration, right? So there was above ground stuff, right? But the reason you went underground is because you wanted to limit choices, right? Because you're like, whoa, I can do anything, right? That was one of the things Bob had said. I can do whatever I want. Well, if you go outside, then they've got 360 degrees of places they can go. But if you say, you need to explore underground, guess what? They can't go everywhere. There's only so many choices.
Yeah, there's only so many doors to knock down.
Exactly, right? So that helps you out. But one of the things you could do in old dungeons, which I think is very rare today, if not extinct, unless you go OSR, is the idea of mapping a dungeon and kind of trying to figure out the rhyme or reason, or, hey, here's some space. There's a lot of empty space over here. Is this a secret door? Is there something over here? All the challenges of, oh man, my map doesn't match up now. Did I get teleported? Is this a slanting, a sloping passageway going through a one-way door, hitting a slide trap that drops you down 3 levels?
Yeah.
And you don't know how to get out.
That's really interesting. Because I feel like
these sorts of things.
Yeah, all of those like tricks, more or less, that the Dungeon Master could be laying out, probably like they're just either built in such a way that the players sort of expect and know to look for them already, or even like in my earlier days when we did like hand draw a lot of the maps when we were underground, it was still a matter of like, I guess my DM definitely wasn't pulling off those kind of things. Wasn't having the sloping corridors and stuff. Because I think modules at this point, like we were playing modern stuff or he was homebrewing, but he didn't get to the point of like thinking to insert all of these things that could twist you around in there. So yeah, that's very true. That's kind of a lost part.
If you think about the dwarven ability of detect sloping passages, right, which was really important in those days, it doesn't really matter as much now, but it mattered then.
It was a big deal, and that's why elves could spot a secret door just walking by it,
right,
on a roll of a 1 on a 1d6. Otherwise, you had to spend a minute, which is a melee round, searching that area. Guess what happens if you're searching an area standing still for a while? It was alluded to earlier. Wandering monsters start coming to you, right? So you had to, because as the dungeon master, you didn't want people to stagnate and just be like, I search here, I search. It kills the game, right? It kills the momentum.
And so, along with these other like innovations that either people started coming up with or they were put into the rules, a good question that came up was, to the best of both of your knowledge, what was the game design process like in the offices, I guess, of TSR? What was that, or maybe even before TSR? What was that game design process like for the earliest editions of D&D?
Well, Luke, you got to take that.
So I was very young at this point, but I did play test a lot of these early modules. And if you look at them, they're like 12 pages. Like Steading of the Hill Giant Chief is 12 pages, but that's a couple adventures, and there's a fair amount of story in there, right? Not a lot of illustrations.
Yeah.
It's like, block text. But it basically gave you 2 or 3 paragraphs maybe of intro stuff, right? Like, hey, the Duke of the area or the Baron needs you to go and check this out. And then here's kind of what they're doing, a whole bunch of monster stats, and a little bit at the end. And then you had to kind of weave your story together. So it was pretty loose. It was pretty loose. It was mostly data that then as a dungeon master you would shape. Well, why is that? When it was written, it was intended to give you a rule set to create your own world of adventure that you would tailor the way you wanted to. Here are some rules. Keep what you want. Get rid of what you don't. Have consistency though, because you can't be capricious, otherwise that harms the game. But make it your own. Elves are 6 feet tall and live forever. Okay, that's what in your world. That's what they are. Whatever you want to do, you can do. Then I think I'm guessing there was probably a monetary realization, and I think it was Judges. It wasn't Judges Guild. I can't remember who put out the very first module. The name escapes me at the moment. Somebody put out an adventure module, and I bet the idea was, wait a second, we can only sell so many rule sets. But if we can sell people prepackaged adventures, that's a whole new sale. Yeah, we could sell that everybody who's already bought rule sets, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's probably where it came from. The rules back then it was based on you're going to go fight stuff in various stripes. Now that module process, you did start to have a reason for stringing these scenarios together, as opposed to just a mega dungeon. Hey, there's treasure under there, and you're a Conan-like person who always needs treasure, right?
Yeah.
So there was like, okay, there's the hill giants. Oh, look, it points to the frost giants who point to the fire giants. Hey, who's this other secret group of people? What?
Mm-hmm.
There's like dark elves that live underground and are evil? What? And then you have to explore that, and then there was a whole drow thing, and so you started getting a storyline, bad guys who escape, that you want to chase, that really hooks you in.
Yeah.
And I think the designers started thinking about storylines and, obviously development. There was world building going on with the setting. People want to know more about the lands and the people who were there and the political relations and the geography. So there was that. Yeah. So it was an evolution over time to give people more and more info as more and more people learned how to play and got curious and moved past the simple kick in the door, kill stuff,
right?
Kill the monster.
And and then there's treasure. 10 by 10 room with a dozen orcs. Yeah. What are they doing there?
And
waiting for you to come in and fight them.
From your, so you had your experiences though. You said like playtesting some of the original, what became the original modules, either at home or I don't know if you ever like went into the office, bring your son to work day or anything. But
yeah, all that happened at home in the evening. So people would work during the day, and then at night they would come over and play test stuff. So cool. Which is how I got to be there, because I was, like I said, still pretty young.
Yeah.
And oftentimes my mom would say, 9 o'clock.
Time for bed.
we're in the middle of combat.
All right.
It was
And
rough.
then
It was rough.
and so
It was hard to go to bed. Believe me, we had a lot of nights where we
Oh,
were
yeah.
you said 4 a.m. with
ridiculous
the Dark
hours.
Tower.
Oh
So
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Actually, so in Dark Tower, just to give our dear Janelle a little bit of props, there were these 3 things called the soul gems, and they embedded themselves in your head. And my character actually got the bad gem that made you the bad guy, right?
No.
And I really, I'd only played sporadically before this, and I decided I was just going to try to do everything I could to wipe the party, because I felt like that was what I was supposed to do. I was the bad guy. So I was sucking levels from them. I dropped the roof on them. It was really, I killed one of the characters. They did bring him back to life. That was another thing.
Wow.
You died a lot more in the old days, right,
It's
Luke?
true.
So
It was deadlier. It was deadlier. Yeah, there was. I mean, you're alluding to it, but I mean, just save or die poison. Like you could be, I played this character for 3 years, every week or whatever it is, and I built up to 12th level. Oh my gosh, that's an almost incredible superhero. You're super tough. One bad roll from a giant spider or something like that, and you're done.
What's
Okay.
this little pin in my finger?
There's a poisonous snake. It's like a 1 hit point snake. Uh-oh. I rolled a 2 on my saving throw. You're done.
I think this is the perfect segue to a quick one here that I found funny in the comments. Was, are the grognards right? Is the game easier today than it was back in the day? Depends on how you define easier, maybe. But go ahead.
I think if you validate the idea that you got killed a lot more, and the definitely the push was to be more aggressive against characters,
more adversarial. Yeah.
I think that's probably true. I think we are a kinder, gentler Dungeons and Dragons these days.
Yeah. Well, and I would say it's really just a difference in an evolution, sort of. So we said, how is the game different? Well, okay. Most of the people who came into gaming initially came out of a wargaming background.
Mm-hmm.
So you weren't necessarily attached to miniatures on the board or whatever in that scenario. And when you made a character in D&D, it wasn't that you were maybe the hero of a book. You were the main character of a book. You didn't have main character syndrome or something. I think kids use that term or something right now, right? So you're just a schlub going on an adventure, and you hope to be a hero someday, right? But you're just starting off, and you might die. And guess what? A lot of times, if somebody died, you just cross out their name and put a different name, and just say, "Okay, I'm just recycling this guy or whatever."
His
Bob's
twin
cousin
brother,
or whatever it is. Yeah, his twin brother. Yeah. This is Rob, or he was Kent.
Been there and done that.
I'm Brent. I'm his twin brother Brent. And I'm going on this adventure now. I have the same equipment and same stats. So yeah, that would happen. Now, of course, as people became more invested, they started role playing more. They started identifying with their person, with this character as a portion or a facet of their personality, even, right?
Mm-hmm.
To an extent. Or just something that they cared about, even though it's make-believe, right?
Yeah.
And they invested a lot of time, and they didn't want it to be destroyed too easily. And so, sure, you could have resurrections and things like that, which is a great way to bring things back. And honestly, if you're a good DM, you can finagle ways to have them saved, and they owe, this greater being, a favor that's going to come in, and be a little plot twist later. So there's lots of ways to deal with that. But I think not every DM is super skilled at that sort of stuff, and so people made up various rules changes to make it a bit harder to die. Like, instead of, I'm at 0 hit points, you're dead. It's okay. You can go to -10, and we could hit you with a cure. And now we're in 5th edition where you're making death saves, and people have healing words, and no matter what, you're only dropped to 0. So now I would say your characters are definitely the chosen heroes of the realm. They are special. They you're not a schlub going in there hoping to become a hero. You're special. You are just not. You're not a schlub. You've got promise, and you're going to make it through. It's really hard to kill you. Yeah. Now, I do have to say, I was a little disappointed. I was like, it is pretty hard in 5th edition to kill someone off. It's because I wasn't a big enough jerk. I played Baldur's Gate. Those the computer is. Those guys are jerks. If your character gets dropped, they ignore the rest of you and all take the free hits until you're dead.
Yeah, the free wax.
I can, so because a party member would fall, or a player would fall down when I'm DMing, I'm like, okay, I'm the bad guy. I'm not going to pay attention to that. The person who's down. I'm going to attack the ones who are up. Now, finish the one. Make sure you finish the one.
All right.
Squash them like a bug.
Yeah. So we have a good point to go off of that. But before we do, as we get into talking about the present of RPGs at this today, you guys are both well-established game designers currently working on an exciting project together. Could you take a moment to tell us about it? Maybe Alphinius, if you want to take the lead on
Luke,
that one.
or you want to start?
Oh, either of you. Yeah.
I will.
All right, I'll start, and you can.
You approached me with this
in.
idea, so you can start.
It was all my fault.
That's right.
So I don't know. This thing is falling out of my ear. I don't care. Anyway, I can still hear you in this ear, which is good. So a long time ago, when we began this creation of this world of Xyalthae, which is a corrupted world, we really tried hard to make it special. Part of the specialness of it is on the maps and in certain places, we put things that were nods to things, people, places, adventures, and all of that stuff that mattered to me in particular, but also to gaming in general. And in East Verdestia, next to the Mithril Mountains, I put this thing called Gyzaengaxx. And I put it there because I loved your dad, Luke, and what he did for gaming. And obviously I couldn't use the name without some kind of permission, and we didn't even know each other at that time. But I
would have said no anyway. Just
I imagine you would have said
yes.
No, you bastard. So anyway, I put this place called Gygax, and then of course we ran into each other at GaryCon and started talking and all of this stuff. And then I don't remember exactly the evolution of it, but we decided that we would collaborate with Gaxx, Worx, and Gooey to create an adventure homage to your dad called the Tomb of Gyzaengaxx. And over almost a year and a half period with some family tragedies that happened in between and all of that stuff, we finally got to this place where we were making something that I think is incredibly special. And as a fanboy, I'm kind of geeking out about it, honestly. To be able to, we have this wonderful ghost, right, Luke, named Gerald Gyzaengaxx, and we have well, I'll let you go. We have the family is there. Go ahead. You go from here.
Yes.
I'll jump in later.
Yes, this is fantastic. So he had Gyzaengaxx, and we thought, well, what could we do, and what would be fun? And we all decided that a great old adventure that we knew and loved was the village of Hamlet, and it happens to be my first adventure ever. Yeah. I thought, wow, yeah, let's do this. This is going to be cool. And he said, well, why not? Part of it and part of the plot ties to the Gyzaengaxx family, and I'm a retired soldier, Lukash Gyzaengaxx, and I have my wife with me, Shira, and my children, and I had them pose, and we got this great art, because if you haven't looked at a Gooey Cube product, you should.
I've seen
They
it,
really are beautiful presentations. The artwork is great, and it's not just fluff. They also have good, solid organization and excellent material in there as well, which is why I'm working with Alphinius. I think he does a great job, and the whole company does a great job. But the presentation is absolutely stunning. And so I had my daughters, I wrote up a little paragraph on what kind of character they might be, and I got them dressed up in some garb that we had, just whether it's holding a ruler or whatever it is, like a sword. And we took pictures of it, and sure enough, they made these great beautiful poses for him. And so we're going to be in. Obviously, it's not Hamlet. It's Ethel, because it's an anagram, I think is a right word, of Hamlet, right? Because my dad loved to name things like that in the world of Greyhawk, right? Yeah, anagrams and make references to people. There's, the county, duchy, and principality of Ulick. That's Luke, right? Right?
Yes.
And there's, there's Heidi, which is my sister Heidi, Sundi, which is Cindy, Alyssa, which is Elisa, Ernst, which is my brother Ernie. Of course, and then there's most people don't get this one. The Pomarge was a place that was overrun by humanoids, right? And is a land that's orcs and a lot of bad stuff going on. But it was once a great place. Well, my mother's maiden name just happens to be Mary Jo Powell. Pomarj, Pomarj, right? So he would take stuff and scramble them around, and make names of stuff. So we thought, hey, let's scramble a omelet, and come up with that film, which we did. And so I was there, and then I believe it was Alphinius who said, hey, maybe we can have a couple more people that we know appear as NPCs, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good idea. And so I started asking, because I thought, how many of these creators appear in a work as a caricature of themselves? And I couldn't remember very many, if any. So we invited several people, and the vast majority said yes. So we have, Larry Elmore's contribution in there, Ed Greenwood, there's just Margaret Weiss did a character for us as well. There's a ton, Skip Williams, and a whole bunch of folks that are going to be NPCs in that film, which I just think is super fun. We made an homage to the old Inn of the Welcome Wench, which was in the 70s an okay thing to have in a monster.
It's not so okay today, which I agree with, right? We agree with that.
Yes, we looked at that and said, well, perhaps we have to. Yes, perhaps we'll go.
We can give that a new anagram. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you think about it, that's it's hard to believe. It's like 50 years ago.
Yeah, true.
It's a long time ago, and stuff changes a lot in 50 years. Think about it. In 1975, if you went back 50 years, you were in 1925. The Great Depression had even started. There wasn't even a World War II or Korea or Vietnam, or a civil rights movement, or
most
all
people
these various
still
things.
rode horses.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so it's like, wow, this is D&D has been around for a while. But anyway, sorry. I'm
so I think it's like this is a cool capstone. It's a cool time for it all to happen. And like you said, it's an homage to not even just your family, but also to so many other people who had a hand in the early editions and the formation of what we know the game to be today, how it all began.
And you can only get the collector's edition, which is a special version that we are making as part of the crowdfund. So I do believe it has I'm a collector. I'm a crazy collector. Luke, I've been to your house, but you haven't been to mine. You need to come. I will show you how. My wife calls me a hoarder. I say I can't be a hoarder because I don't keep everything. I only hoard stuff about Dungeons and Dragons. That's all I hoard. So anyway, it is. I believe it's got some marvelous collectability. We're doing a lot of wonderful stretch goals. Luke and I have been talking about those. We also already have a stretch goal before we even start that people can check out called the Gooey Hall, which includes an evening in F-Home, which is a special print we're making. And Luke was going down the road of this. We're not going to call it the Inn of the Welcome Wench. We're going to call it the Gray Hawk Inn. Yep. And the Gray Hawk is actually a wyvern that is mounted on the wall inside of the tavern. Cool. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yes, I'm looking at you all on the screen right now. Yes, the Gray Hawk Inn, and we're going to take all of the wonderful characters, the folks that are listed on the site, and people can look and see, and we're going to have them all in the tavern, having a good time in F-Home in the evening. So there's a lot of wonderful things we're planning, Bob. I think that even if you're very new to the game, is still magnificent and wonderful.
Yeah, and that I say that's like the periphery. That's the fancy dressing around the core of a fun adventure, which is what everybody wants when they buy a module, right? Yes, it's great to have these things. You want a good adventure. Well, there's going to be some adventure in there, and you're going to get.
And it's going to be good. Yes, Luke, we got we got some good plans. Yes, it's going to be great.
Right. I think today, what you want is a little bit of mental work, a little bit of clue following, maybe a little bit of puzzle solving or figuring out, riddling, that sort of thing, and some combat that gives you tension, right?
Yes.
That puts you in a position where you're not sure if you're going to make it unless you play carefully, husband your resources, and are wise in choices. I think you have to have that element, or else it's not very exciting, whether you're watching a movie, reading a book, or playing an RPG. The tension is what's going to really
draw you in.
Because, oh my God, skin in the game. What's going to happen?
Yes, Bob. In truth, we're trying to transcend this. We want to be enthralling. We want to be mysterious. We want to be grimdark. We want to be intense, and we want to be lampoony. So we're trying to do it all.
All right. Well, yeah. So thank you for sharing this inside scoop on all that. It's going to be exciting to see where it goes from here. And I want to, revisit our initial question here. So with all this in mind, like talking about, we've covered a lot of the past and the origins, and we've even, even just through that discussed of how things evolved through time, through the last couple decades to get to where we are now. So today, how is it, or rather, again, what is your take on how you see people today interacting with TTRPGs, and maybe how is that different from the early days?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I touched upon this before. It's an evolution over time, and as society changes, right? We're members of society,
Yep.
So our tastes change. Fashion changes, music changes, the way movies are paced changes. If you watch some of the great movies from the 70s, they're oftentimes a lot slower to build, right? Now, if you tried that, people would be like, oh my gosh, this is boring. Boom, I'm done in 10 or 15 minutes, right? So now you open up with the action scene, and like James Bond usually open with some action scenes and stuff like that, right? Or you get, you're gonna get some action right away, and then maybe you get some explanation. But people's attention spans have shortened a bit, I would say. We used to play board games like, if anyone's heard of Titan, maybe that's a bit of an esoteric reference, but even Risk or games like that, they take quite a while to finish, right? Monopoly, oh my gosh, that takes a long time to grind it out and get to the last person, right? So you could play Titan for 8 or 12 hours, right? And people would do that. If you have a movie that's 3 hours now, that's gonna that's pretty crazy. So I would say the pacing is different. The expectations of what's going to go on are different. The amount of deadliness in it is probably, or capricious deadliness maybe is what I would say. Because guess what? Just a bad die roll could be the end of you, right? Now, typically, if you make a bad die roll, you'll get a consequence, but you'll get an opportunity to make another die roll and be able to come up, in a couple rounds or something like that. It's usually not like, oh well, sorry, bro, you're done. Like that's it. So I think those are some differences. There's also I would say that in older forms of D&D, can't really speak to other role playing games, certainly different. But in D&D, there was a bit of wonkiness, I'll call it. A first level fighter was not the same as a first level magic user, right? That magic user generally had a very high armor class, which was bad that time, right? Easy to hit. A D4 of hit points, right? 1 D4, you could have 1 hit point, and 1 spell that you had to randomly generate on a chart in the DMG, right? In the Dungeon Master's Guide. And you got to memorize 1 spell in advance using the Vancian magic system, right? Which comes from the Dying Earth, where magicians forced magic into their brains. They had to hold the spell there, right? So you had spell slots, and you wrote them down, right? And that's what you had. What was in your spell book didn't matter until you could rest and study. So a couple different things. Now you have much more flexibility, less rigidity in the game, and a higher chance of survival. I think what that so it's more fast and free flowing and loose, and the rule of cool thing applies, right? In older school D&D, I think what was valued or what was promoted and trained was pre-planning, thinking about the scenario going on, husbanding your resources, being innovative with the spells that you chose. Could I find new ways to do it? Being cautious, because healing was another big deal. You healed 1 point a day by sleeping. By sleeping 8 hours. One hit point. 1 hit point. Yeah, that's it. 1. And if you weren't a cleric or a druid, or maybe a paladin who could lay hands, which was 2 points per level, not a lot, you weren't getting healed. Or you drink a potion, which was also rare. So it was much more, you had to be deliberate and planned, and have done intelligence, and thought about where you're going, what you're going to do, and how to tackle that challenge and obstacle put in front of you with the resources you had. And guess what? If you weren't ready, there was something that you had to do. Run away.
Yeah, imagine that.
Run
Get out of
away.
there.
Right. Now I think if characters, you put them in there and you say, and there's a red dragon, they're going to be like, okay, how are we going to kill this red dragon?
Right.
You might just say, run.
Yeah.
Run for it. This is not our day. This is way too powerful to us. We can't fight every single thing. We're not the baddest people on the planet. We can come back another time, or just avoid this.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of another question here that was, should game masters worry about balancing encounters? Because I think in the earlier days it was more so the players balance it by deciding whether or not they should get the heck out of there. And today, usually, it's set up that they'll at least have a chance. And it's usually up to the game master to then figure out, okay, how many guys exactly do I need to make sure they have the right chance without it being too deadly or too easy, and finding that spot in between. But maybe now jumping ahead. Oh, yes, Alphinius.
Oh, do you want me to answer that, Bob? Because I actually... I actually think it's better to not balance. I actually think that some of the old school stuff made new is better. Again, the evolution of the game is very positive, as Luke just walked through many wonderful examples of that stuff. And I honestly, to be able to play virtually with your friends anywhere they are, anywhere in the world, around a virtual tabletop. What I love the most about the game, though, is it's not a computer game. And that's the only thing I'm kind of worried about as the future progresses, is do those who sort of control the reins of the game, do they try to push it more and more to the electronified version? Because I think part of the reason why it received such popularity over the last 2 decades is because it's more of a return to being around a table rather than around a computer. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited at what is going on with the game. It's more approachable than it's ever been. It's very clear that it's bringing so many benefits to people. All of that stuff is just magnificent. So anyway,
I'm glad you said all that. A quick aside: we're at the hour. Can we go for another 10 minutes? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what you said that I hadn't really mentioned. The early adherents to D&D, the early converts, early adopters of D&D, tended to be very bright because those books were not easy to figure out. It was not intuitive. They assumed you were a wargamer and that you had read and that you had chainmail already, that you possessed that. Because they say, hey, look at chainmail. What do you mean? I just bought this game, and now you're telling me I have to look at this other. And they presupposed that you knew a lot of terms and things like that.
True.
And I imagine it was incredibly puzzling if you were a young person, 14 or whatever, and you pick up these 3 booklets and go, whoa, this is pretty cool. And you start reading, you're like, oh, my eyes are crossing. So you just probably had to make a lot of stuff up. And you probably got it wrong. And,
you definitely got it wrong.
Right. And so J. Eric Holmes went about and made basic D&D. And my dad said, okay, I'm going to make Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. But you look at that book. Man, I have to say, it's my dad, so I'm a little biased here. But that thing is really genius compared to what was out there at the time. And people say, oh, it's written in high Gygaxian and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, he loved words. He thought each word had meaning and it mattered.
Yeah.
Boy, it really lays out a lot of information on how to dungeon master, how to world build, how to do all these really cool monsters and magic items and stuff that didn't exist. I mean, a kobold in mythology could be 10 feet tall. Mm-hmm. Now, if you say kobold to somebody, we know. It's a little guy, right? Either a little dog-like guy or a little tiny dragon-like guy if you're newer school, right? So it just depends. So that's definitely changes that it was hard to learn and wonky and a lot of crunch to figure it out. And you really learn from watching other people, I think, than from reading it, right? Mm. Whereas I think today you can pick up a 5th edition book, which Mike Merles and his team did such a wonderful job with. And they have smoothed out the wonkiness. So everybody has a longsword, as they say. Yeah, everybody has that chance. They all progress pretty well. Yeah. And it's easily understandable pretty rapidly by just about everybody. So that's a pretty big change. Yeah. And it has opened up that window for the door, the highway for everybody to play D&D. And stranger yet, it's not nerdy really to play D&D anymore. Or if it is nerdy, it's okay. That's cool. So that was not the case. That was not the case when I was growing up. That was something that you would, people would want to
Yeah.
put you in the,
Hey,
in the
even
shove you in the
when
locker.
I
Yeah, just
started-
shove you in the locker. That's right.
Yeah, even when I started, like I said, I was, out of high school and stuff by the time I started. But my only like interfacing with D&D was at this point was seeing clips of it in like a couple TV shows where it always was like the nerdiest of nerdy characters and all dressed up and all doing like voices and everything. Like it was so theatrical. And so when my friend first asked me to play, I was like, wait a minute, like I'm a nerd, but am I that nerdy? But then lo and behold, here
there was
I am.
that movie with Tom Hanks, right? Monsters and
Oh,
Mazes. Remember that madness? I mean, it was a tough time to be a kid playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. Well, and so now I think you brought up an amazing point, though, Luke. It's like D&D for the most part is part of the mainstream now. It might still be like it's debatable where it's at in there, but it's part of it in one way or another. And so if we try to project our minds into the future here, what is your vision, your take on how people will be interacting with TTRPGs? Let's just say another 10 years. We don't have to jump to 50. That's like, we'll never call it. But maybe in like 10 years, what do you think? Like, how will people be playing? Will it still be all styles? Will it be predominantly one thing over another? Would it still be the physical books? Like, there's so many ways we can look at this question. So, future of
I feel like a politician is going to be asked to make some sort of hard decisions. Someone's going to play back later.
Yeah, there's some danger.
You're totally wrong.
Question.
You're totally wrong. I really think the core of why RPGs are popular, and especially today and appeal to so many folks, is it is typically not played through a screen. Yes, we can, and that's a great alternative, especially during like the pandemic and things where we couldn't connect with one another. But we get a lot of our entertainment through screens. We have to do all of our work through screens. It seems like these days, the vast majority of it. But when do we look at a person's face, laugh, be able to whack each other? Oh man, great job! Whatever it is.
Yeah.
That human interaction is important to us. And if we don't feed that, I think that's problematic. So this is a great excuse to get together, to carve out some time as a busy adult, to carve out some time to spend with your group of friends, or if you don't have them, to make some friends, because we all need that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? For me, gaming is more than just what I do in the adventure. It's also catching up with the people around the table, telling them what's going on in my life, hearing it, like sharing those human moments, right? Then we get into the adventure, and I feel closer oftentimes to those folks because of our shared, our shared hardships, which are completely imaginary, right? In the game, but we still faced them together and overcame them as a team, right? So we earn each other's trust. We're a little bit closer, and I think that's important to people. So my prediction is in 10 years, we will see lots of. I was going to say combat multipliers. That doesn't really apply to this sort of thing. That's an army term. That means make you better at your job, right? So there'll be lots of digital tools and virtual tools that will help DMs and players access information and run the game, and maybe visually more stimulating. But I think the essence of it will be the same, which is a human being presenting a scenario and other human beings figuring out how to go through in the scenario to overcome challenges, and how they are going to fill in the gaps that are in this outline of a story that we've made to move the story forward and give it color.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I agree. I think that while the technology continues to change, I think there's still a through line, even through all the decades we've had so far, that will probably continue. And it would be surprising to see otherwise, really. What do you think?
If it was going to be a computer game, we already have that, right? This already exists, and if that was going to fill the need, which Luke so eloquently described, right, we wouldn't be doing this because the technology already exists for wonderful games that most of us probably are playing. Most of your people who are watching are probably playing them.
Yeah.
And but that human connection is so marvelous, to get together with your friends, to share a meal. In my case, drink a little scotch and other things like that, right? This is magnificent and just wonderful thing to be able to continue to do. And I'm inclined to agree with you, Luke. I think that the future will still be around that table, which is what makes it special, honestly.
All right. I think that is kind of the perfect positive note to wrap up on today. So thank you both so much for making the time for this discussion. Best of luck with Tomb of Gyzaengaxx, and thank everybody at home for submitting great questions to walk us through this. Thank you for your support, and as I always say, keep building.